My name is John. I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. Great to be here today. And my topic today is disappointment, the word disappointment. So this has really helped me in just my present situation and current status of my heart. And hopefully it'll make sense to you too. So I would just want to start with the beautiful question of what has been your greatest or biggest disappointment to date? What's been your biggest disappointment in your life today? And there might be a series of them. There might be a hunt that you might be living in disappointment. And that's kind of what I want to unpack of what is disappointment, where it comes from, and then what I could do about it. So I just want to just share a couple of my great disappointments, and I can remember having my life fall apart as my addiction took over my life in 2005, and ended up at a homeless shelter going through treatment, and just had a new life, had like so much hope and promise of like, okay, I never need to use drugs and alcohol again. All right, we got the tool bag filled. We got some inspiration, and I'm going to amalgamate back into my family, and did so, and it was just like the chaos and the responsibility and the noise of this life that I'm actually sober in. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is hard. And I just remember being in the bathroom and everybody coming in there, and I'm like, I don't own time, I don't own money. And it was just overwhelming, the sense of like responsibility of this new life. Like, what's the hope? I'm disappointed in this life. Like, oh my goodness, like sobriety and using are very close together, although those separated vastly over the last 17 years. But definitely the first year or two was like, man, it was touch and go. Like, what is better? Like, this is disappointing. I don't feel great inside. I don't have this solution. But as I got into recovery more and understanding what recovery is, and that is, I get to be the recovered temple of God and have his spirit of power and love inside of me. And nothing on the outside can cause me to drink or cause me to like suffer internally. So I have the solution inside of me. As we're going through life happens, and those things that come up that are going to drop kick you in the throat are always going to happen. And so that happened in child raising. And so my son at the time was 16 in competitive hockey, and I have a high value for driving vehicles, license. We don't, in our culture, don't really have right into manhood like some of the Islamic countries, and there's circumcision and the bar mitzvahs for the Jew. Like, most of the world has, like, when you're a man because you go through this ceremony. And I believe like kind of it's like driving for in our culture. So like, my son turned 16, and you're going to get your driver's license, your beginners, and he passed, and I let him drive home. And that's great, but it was like rush hour on busy roads, and I was like holding on for dear life because he hadn't figured out driving yet. And so 2 weeks into him having his license, he's in competitive hockey, and we're coming home from church, we're having company, and my wife is at the grocery store. We're waiting outside, and the music blaring and pumping because we're so cool. And my other son screams at me and points to my son, and he's having a seizure, his first seizure that we got to see. And as a parent, it's scary. Like, this isn't how it should be. And we get into CHIO and the meds, and just like having this situation of what should be a 16-year-old's life, and how to parent is very different than what we expected. And to tell you the truth, like, that can be disappointing, of just seeing the laboring and the struggle that he was going through just scholastically. On the ice, nothing ever changed. He was still a bruiser. So And going over the course of time, and maybe a few years ago, he had brain surgery, and it's 70% success rate that you'll never have a seizure, and he does, and he still has, and that can be very disappointing, very discouraging, even for him, because it's a very hard thing to go through, just the healing time, and just some of the, just even the scar and what they remove, and so you have this expectation of a result that didn't get met, and I can be very disappointed. It is very disappointing. And so even today, there's 3 years, the last 3 years, there's been this breakthrough medication in the States for anti-seizure medication. It has amazing results. And so it came to Canada this year, and my son got to take it, and he's been on it for about 3.5 months or so, or 3 months, and he hasn't had a seizure in 2.5 months, and that's a record for I don't know, the last 8 years. And so I could be hopeful that he will never have a seizure again, but am I going to suffer a disappointment if he does? And what that will take away, or what like, and so I just, like, there's a complexity for the word disappointment. We had the beautiful littlest pug. He was all heart. He wanted to be with people. He was like a living teddy bear, and he was a little overboard with my wife, and they had a special relationship. And little buddy, he had accidents, and he swallowed a part of a ball, and we had operation and an eye thing and a tooth going through his lip. The little guy, in his first year had a lot of issues and cost a lot of money. If anybody's ever taken a dog to the vet, it can be very expensive. They don't have the OHIP like we do. And so when he swallowed this ball, you go in for the first appointment, and it's like $700, and then another appointment, and now you're at 1,500. And then by the end of it, it's like, we need surgery, and you've kind of exhausted all things. And so he had surgery, and it was great. And we spent way more money on a dog. We spent more money on that thing than that little animal than anything we probably ever spent money on. But we were very hopeful. And then he about a few months later, he got very sick again and was diagnosed with a congenitive. He was born with a liver disease this whole time. And over the course of the next months or year, he actually passed away because of it. And we're very disappointed on not having him. And there's this little hole that only a pug could fill. We all have a hole, but you just don't know it yet. But when you have one and it leaves, then you're like, oh man. So only Jesus can fill that, by the way. But there's that disappointment of, like, we spent all that money, and it's like, for what? And then the disappointment of not having, like, a little living teddy bear. And so our lives are riddled with these events that we have expectations for that don't come to pass. And this is the cause of my disappointment. And so the actual word disappointment defined is the unhappiness or discouragement that results when your hopes or expectations have not been satisfied, or someone or something that is not as good as you had hoped, imagined, or expected. And so this emotion produces stress. This emotion of having results that I've hoped in, having expectations that aren't satisfied, actually cause me to have stress inside. So stress could be anger, sadness, frustration, grief, and resentment. And so this actually comes out of, and as I unpack this actually comes out of my false self. And if you've ever done inventory, you'll know something about this, but we have these classifications of self. And this is my old ideas and beliefs. This is what causes me not to be okay when I live out of it. And the whole point of this is to die of self. Like, this is what I'm to die of. And we get to go through a process of inventory. So if you have ever done the 12 steps or LifeLab, you'll be familiar with that. Part of that is this expectations, and it's called my ambitions. So what do I want to have happen in this scenario? And these are always, what I've come to learn is these are always rooted in fear. So this is what I want to happen, my ambition, and then security is, what do I really need to happen for me to be okay? So this is what I want and this is what I need, and it's all rooted in fear. It's all rooted in these expectations on how things should be, could be, would be, or have to be for me to be okay. So there's nothing wrong with some of these ideas, because yeah, I want people to respect me. Yeah, I want medication to work. I want to be in that 70% success rate. I need medical attention. I need, these certain relationships or whatever it is. Some of those aren't wrong, but what happens is if they don't get met, it starts to put me in motion. And so fear is always going to set me in motion to actually try to attain the result that I'm looking for. And so I'm actually going to try to control the results that I expect to have happen for me to be okay. So I'm going to, and I'm motivated by good things. I'm motivated by good feelings. I'm motivated by unity. I'm motivated by seeing the best results for certain people, and whether it's health or whether it's a dog, whatever it is, I'm going to try to get the result that my ambitions and securities are calling out for. And so I'm put in motion and I have reasoning behind it. And it's very hard to stop that. It's very hard to intervene that because I have reasoning behind it. But underneath, it's fear-based. And so fear, there's always a delusion or justification, reasoning. And then there's the thinking part of it, which causes my actions. So disappointment is really like this tip of the iceberg. It's kind of like a warning sign on your vehicle. It means like you need attention, because I personally can't afford disappointment very long, because that leads to resentment. And so it's kind of like the tip of the iceberg, what's underneath it. And many of us have had success in absence of whatever substances. And we look at this physical and mental part of our disease, and yeah, that's gone, but the only reason it's gone is because of this spiritual illness that I have, this separation from God. And so I have to focus on that separation. I have to focus on being connected to God for the physical and the mental part of my disease. And so I can get distracted by disappointment, and that's how I play God, because I have these expectations and beliefs how things should be or could be or need to be, and how I want them. And if I stay in that, that is self-propulsion. That is actually the root of all of my problems, is self-will run riot. This is me trying to run the show. And so what I recover from is I quit playing God. I quit being the employer. I quit being the director. I quit being the principal. And I leave all the outcomes to God. I leave the results to God. And if I'm not doing that, I'm the producer of confusion and chaos. And so wherever you see confusion and chaos, and things just aren't stable, then maybe I'm at the core of it trying to produce a result, but that's what I'm achieving. And so these are all like dashboard lights for us to kind of see. To break down the word disappointment, I'm super technical with my English narrative. I'm actually not. If you know me, you'll be laughing right now. But dis, you take the prefix dis, and dis means not or opposite of. And then you look at the word appoint. And so appoint means to assign a job or assign a role to. And then meant is the act of doing something. So basically, when I'm in disappointment, I've appointed results, I've appointed roles, I've appointed expectations, ideas, and beliefs for things to happen that aren't as I would need them to be for me to be okay. And that's where I get disturbed inside. That's where I have that basically turns into resentment. And I'm resentful at the people that are involved. I'm resentful at the people that aren't doing what I need them to do to get these results. And when I'm in resentment, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says resentment is the number one offender. It's not alcohol, it's not pornography, it's not relationships, it's resentment. So my disappointments can easily move to resentment, and that will start to cause me to separate from God because I'm actually starting to do the job of God. And love is consensual. So I actually have to consent for God to do his job. But when I start to take over and start to do his job, then he kind of, in my experience, kind of backs off. And he goes, man, if you want to do my job, I need to let you do that because you're consenting to be the boss. You're consenting to do my job. And so in the narrative of what that looks like is the whole actor and the director, and I need you to do certain things and I need to be seen a certain way for the show to go off well. I need these things to line up. I need people to do certain things. I need a certain paycheck. I need to pay my bills a certain way. I need all of this stuff to happen in order for me to be okay and for you to see that I'm okay. And that's where I run into the difficulties. And so I believe the tip of the iceberg kind of seems like it could be disappointment. So when I'm in disappointment, it's a I need to take a time out and really start to investigate what's under that. What are my expectations? What are the roles that I'm assigning people? I also want to ask you the question, do you believe that God has ever been disappointed in you? Has God ever been disappointed in you? It's funny because I think some of us would be like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I'm disappointed in myself. How can't God be? Like, you should have seen the things I've done, like in the last 2 hours. Of course, God's disappointed in me. I don't believe that God is a God of disappointment. He is a God of appointment. He has appointed things on certain days to happen. He knows the results. He knows the outcomes before they ever happen. And I don't think God has ever been disappointed. I don't think you've ever let down God. I believe God has protected you and guided you in situations where you didn't even know him. He's provided for you. He's come alongside of you and cried with you. But I don't believe he's ever been disappointed in you. And we see that in the narrative of Peter, where one of the toughest disciples, and one of the rock stars of the Bible, he was the right-hand man of Jesus. And as they're in the upper room, Jesus is talking about going to the grave and doing what he came to do. And he just says that people will betray me and people will be against me. And Peter says, I will never betray you. And he says, Peter, before the rooster crows, you'll betray me 3 times. And that night he betrayed Jesus 3 times. Jesus was beaten and flogged and taken and was going to be crucified, and he ran away. And he hid in the bushes, so to say. He was still in the area, in the scene, but he didn't want to be seen. And when he was accused of being one of those Galileans, he said, no, what are you talking? I don't even know the man. And the rooster crows on the 3rd time he denied Jesus. He betrayed Jesus. That's my best rooster caw. And he was cut to the heart, and he's like, I'm a betrayer. What have I done? And Jesus knows that. And Jesus wants to affirm him that he isn't a betrayer. He isn't his mistakes. A little while later, we see the narrative of Jesus being raised from the dead after 3 days. And the disciples, they're at a loss. Like, man, what happened? Where, like, this isn't what we predicted. This isn't the expectations. They were probably disappointed. They thought Rome was going to be thrown over. They thought like there was resurrection of the new world and Jerusalem and the temple and all of this stuff. And they're like, this is the most disappointing day of our lives. We threw our lives away for this. We left our wives and our children for 3 years. Let's go fishing. Let's make a living. So they went fishing, caught nothing that night. And as they were coming in, the sun's coming up. They see a figure on the beach, and the figure yells at them, throw your nets over on the other side of the boat, which they did. They didn't want to, probably because they were pro fishermen. They didn't catch anything all night. They knew what was up. And so they did it anyway. They obeyed. and they caught so many fish, the boat began to sink. Another boat had to come out, and they had so many fish. They got to shore. Peter was like, "It's Jesus." He jumps out of the boat, tries to walk on water, almost dies because he's drowning, but he's swimming, and he just wants to see Jesus. And while they're sitting around the campfire, you know, in the early morning, I can hear the birds, the sun's coming up. They got so many fish. They're excited again. The disappointment has just gone away. And Jesus looks at Peter, like grabs him in the face like a little kid, and he says, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter's like, "Yeah." Oh, do I ever? Didn't see that coming. Fist pump, high five. Man, we got fish. You're back. Like, do I love you? And he says, "Feed my sheep." I'm like, "Oh, of course. I'll feed your sheep all day. Look at the fish. Like, no one's ever going to go hungry on my watch." Yeah, as he's eating fish. And then Jesus says, "Hey, Peter, do you love me?" And he's like, "Hey, man, you need a hug? A little tickle fight?" Like, yeah, of course. Like, hug? Yes, I love you. Feed my sheep. Yeah, I know. Got that. We're going to. It's like, yeah. And then he said it a third time. "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter's like, "Man, why are you saying it three times? Like, am I in trouble? Am I saying the wrong answer?" Like, I know when my wife says something to me three times, or my dad when I was little, it's like, okay, I'm missing something. I got the wrong answer. And Peter was like, "Yeah, like, why? This is starting to hurt my feelings. Feed my sheep." And Jesus had to speak the same language as Peter betrayed Jesus three times. Jesus comes at him three times and saying, "You're not your mistakes. I'm not disappointed in you. I've appointed you to feed my sheep. I've appointed you to be a child that my perfect love casts out all fear. You're appointed in this appointment to do this mission and live for me. And so I'm not disappointed in you." And so that was just God's reaffirming that he's never been disappointed in any of us, because he appoints all things. He already knows the outcomes. He already knows what's going to happen, what won't happen. And we just get to be his children. But when I start to be the adult, that's where I get disappointed. And that disappointment causes resentment, and that resentment causes me to run the show, and that resentment causes God to have to sit on the sidelines and just be the cheerleader. And so I just want to invite everybody today to really take a look at the dashboard lights of your car. Are you living in disappointment? What are your ambitions and security? What do you need and what do you want? What are the things in your life that aren't as they should be, or as they seem to be, or as you would like them? What are those things in your life? And then how are you trying to run the show? How are you doing God's job? How are you getting in the middle? How are you trying to get the outcomes that you need for you to be okay? Because that resentment is our number one offender. And it's not just for the alcoholics, it's for everybody else.